I'm curious. I am curious. Curious.
By nature.
Welcome to Curious by Nature. I'm Jessica Johnson at Newswise. Power grids are not ready for the coming green energy revolution. As more and more people turn to renewable sources like wind and solar, smart management of peak demand will become vital to store and distribute electricity where it's needed and when it's needed. But who can look beyond the current system's limitations to anticipate and plan for the energy infrastructure of the future? Our next guest from Arizona State University is working to solve our green energy destiny. Nate, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
It's great to be speaking to you today, Jessica. My name is Nate Johnson. I'm a professor of systems engineering at Arizona State University. And at that institution, I also have additional roles as the assistant director of research with the Global Futures Laboratory and the director of the Laboratory for Energy and Power Solutions.
So tell me more about your work and what you do.
Being a public institution, we resonate with the concept of creating public value. And while many academic institutions, university colleges, and more focus heavily on research and education, it is our mandate, is it our mission, and it is our purpose to do more. And so in creating that public value, we found that we need to create different approaches to different services. So we break our projects into one or more of 6 different steps. The first we call solutions brokering, which is getting an accurate understanding of the problem and then matching it up with a possible solution set. Because if we're going to invest tens of thousands of hours and hundreds of millions of dollars, it'd be nice to know if we're pointed in the right direction. The second is master planning. So looking at 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, how do we get to connect people that are off grid? How do we grow the national electric grid to enhance renewables? Working with military installations and increasing resilience, what are the steps that one would take? The third area is project development. And so now if we know the direction we're headed, we know the long-term plan, what are the specific actionable steps? And we get involved in the technical design, the business model design, and then also the policy design around that. The fourth area then comes research and development, which is more of the traditional core of a university. So what is the intellectual property? What is the knowledge generated? We typically work in the advancement of controls and design of the electric power grid. The fifth area is demonstration. So if you can think it, can you do it? And so we demonstrate things both on-grid and off-grid to go beyond being a think tank into a do tank. And then the last, of course, is workforce development, realizing that if you took the aggregate capacity of everyone working in the energy sector globally, we're woefully inadequate to meet the demand signal at the scale and speed we need to do it. And so we literally just need more people. And so we advance that greatly as well.
First of all, for the grid, how much more and how soon can the grid grow to add more renewable energy?
So thinking about a specific use case, such as Madagascar or Malawi, working with the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All program, as well as NREC International and other partners, how do we create an integrated energy plan that enables universal access to clean electricity and energy by 2030? So this includes electrification, clean cooking, which is what we led, and then there's also cold chain and other pieces you could add too, such as electric vehicles. And if you look at those in aggregate, as well as low carbon fuels, such as electricity, how do you design the entire nation, design the entire system in order to leverage the benefits of assets that have been electrified? And so then we develop an entire national plan out to 2030 for these two nations. And now that's being advanced with that plan, that roadmap, for investments of anywhere between $40 million to $100 million by organizations such as OPEC for bioethanol plants, grid expansion to benefit people in the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands immediately, with the intent to provide benefit to millions of people and 10 millions of people in the next 3 to 5 years.
Looking at where they are now versus, let's say, 5 years from now, they will be mostly on renewable energy.
It's been valuable to connect the master planning exercise to the project development and the demonstration, because there's a lot of good studies, there's a lot of good reports, but the ideas create impact when they're applied. And so we show up differently than most universities because we're a partner throughout the entire process. And so with those plans, now we're working with those nations, and then hopping over, I guess I could, to the Pacific in Fiji, there's 300 off-grid isolated communities in the outer islands, which do not have access to electricity. And so we completed site assessments, technical design, business model design, and are now undergoing additional phases for 75 of those sites that'll lead to public tender. So these will be bids by private sector partners to construct about $40 million of capital equipment for solar hybrid microgrids to provide energy access, but then also do it in a low or no carbon way. And that'll provide benefit to about 20,000 people. Mm-hmm. And so that's about a 5-year effort where we are involved in that solution brokering, master planning, project development, and then with our other partners and counterparts all the way through to training, implementation, steel on the ground. And very importantly, is that when you look at innovation, you can't just look at the technology. You also need to look at the innovation in business model and policy to unlock new opportunities for people to work together. And that's extremely important because the energy transition, if we just went business as usual, we're not going to move fast enough. And so we need to innovate in technology, business model, and policy to unlock new ways to work together.
So my dream would be to be able to produce all of my electricity energy that I consume on a daily basis and use with my electric car to be able to create it from and to collect it from solar panels or from wind turbines or other ways and be able to use that so that I don't consume non-renewable energy sources. Do you think that will be ever possible?
And looking to electric vehicles, there's going to be more on the road. There's going to be more in our homes. There's going to be more in businesses. There's going to be more on fleets, universities, buses, Amazon, and more. And one of the challenges then is, do we have enough electricity to charge them? And so right now the utilities are being forced to keep on some of their assets, coal and more, and provided also with the introduction of data centers, keep these carbon-intensive assets on to provide the electricity for that expansion. And so if everyone were to plug in their electric vehicles at the same time, let's just say 5 to 10 years from now with the projected growth of EVs, we don't have enough electricity to do that. And so 50%, 70%, or 90% of these would need to be what we call managed charging, which is you plug it in and it'll get charged up over a duration of time that you specify when there's enough renewables or power so that the grid doesn't fail when everyone wants to charge them up. And you can take a look at that in your homes with the vacuum cleaner or hair dryer or whatever it is. When you turn that in, plug that in and turn it on, the lights temporarily dim. Now, if you had 5 vacuum cleaners go on in your house at once, the lights would probably not dim. They would probably go off. The exact same principle applies to electric vehicles.
So currently, is the U.S. about 30% renewable, or how much?
In the United States, about 60% of the electric power is produced by fossil fuels, with about 40% of it being produced by renewables and nuclear, about an even split between those. Solar is definitely increasing as wind is increasing. The advancement and the influx of funding into geothermal will further be increasing geothermal. There's also hydrogen. But what's also been very interesting is one of the reasons for the advancement of small modular nuclear reactors is that they're small scale and can be deployed in what we'd call load pockets or areas where there is a high amount of load, but there's an insufficient amount of generation. Some examples of that are large-scale manufacturing. There is also data centers is an important growing part of the U.S. economy, global economy, given the advances in AI. And so a data center could get built in 12 to 18 months, but it takes the electric grid 3 to 4 years to be able to provide it with power. So we're slowing economic development due to supply chain and permitting to get the equipment there to build the electric grid. But with a small modular nuclear reactor, and there's not enough materials right now to go around, and it's a new technology, but you could build a data center, you could build a nuclear reactor adjacent to one another to provide the power in real time, potentially faster than it would take for the electric grid to be able to meet and get there at its full capacity.
Interesting. Yeah, there's been a lot of, coverage and news about, especially in the Washington, D.C. area and the Northern Virginia area, about the data centers and their effect on the electric grid. So are these small or modular nuclear reactors, are they already being produced and being used currently?
The small modular reactors are being produced. There will be prototypes and pilot demonstrations in a commercial environment as early as 2025.
So there's so many aspects to energy, right? I mean, this is just one, and the electric vehicles and what you work a lot on in the load management. What are some of the particular aspects of what you're doing that maybe relate to individuals and that may be affecting their lives?
The past several decades, we've had an incorrect viewpoint on the creation of electricity and energy as a commodity. And we've been fortunate to transition that knowledge in terms of a mandatory action into thinking about people as customers that have a choice. And now thinking about people not just as customers, but as partners, particularly as individuals can install solar storage, have electric vehicles. They're now active participants rather than passive participants in the energy marketplace. And working with individuals and families and communities. And in this next year, the total amount that were targeted, affected, impact positively is about 100,000 people through a variety of renewable projects, I think in excess of 150 megawatts right now. A lot of that's focused on energy access and equity internationally. Also in the state of Arizona, working with the governor's office and the Office of Resilience on solar storage systems for low and income and disadvantaged communities or LIDAC communities. And then supporting transitioning individuals that want to be in the energy sector and marketplace, but their skill sets in the fossil fuel sector and skill sets as a transitioning veteran of the military are now outdated to compete and earn a living in this new energy economy. And that's wonderful to work with and learn from those individuals as we collaboratively advance our common goals.
Tell me more about the project or what you're working on in Arizona for the low-income families and the storage. Can you describe that and what that looks like a little bit more?
There's a few projects that we're working on in the state of Arizona. The first is supported by the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a greenhouse reduction plan for the entire state. So how do we get to zero emissions by 2050? That gets to the solutions brokering and master planning that I spoke about earlier. The next area of work is additionally supported by the EPA. That's $156 million going to the governor's office with our team at Arizona State supporting for workforce development and planning for solar storage for LIDAC or low-income disadvantaged groups. And that will proceed for the next 5 years and provide lower energy bills and resilient energy solutions in the case of a heat wave for thousands of households.
That project specifically for the heat wave and to be able to provide lower cost energy. How does that happen? How does that work exactly?
Support by the Biden-Harris administration has been targeted at low-income and disadvantaged communities to provide them an opportunity to access lower-cost power and renewables in a way that generally only wealthy families have the opportunity to, because they have the credit score and the ability to borrow, get loans to secure finances to put these greener assets in their houses or in their homes with electric vehicles. And so as a result, the people who are least able to pay for their electric bill have, unfortunately, a larger cost electric bill. And also that's gets worse when the dated housing infrastructure that the families live in is unfortunately thinner walls, which require more air conditioning and hence electricity to keep at a bearable temperature. And when you get into heat waves, that's also the houses which are going to be most likely to warm up and going to be in denser areas and areas less close to critical services to migrate to or move to in the case of a heat wave and the grid being down. And there are some municipalities that are building resilience hubs or oases in case of catastrophic and unforeseeable events as a backup to, preserve not just life, but quality of life in the event of catastrophic events.
Can you describe some of the most fascinating aspects of what you're doing currently?
As a systems engineer and a research director within the Global Futures Laboratory, I think a lot about futures and a lot about systems. And one of the most exciting areas to work at is an energy problem, such as decarbonizing the U.S. electric grid. And how do we conceptually understand that? Look at how do we describe that in terms of systems, model that mathematically, and then visualize it so you can have a real-time conversation with a number of stakeholders that would usually work separate and sequentially over a matter of months to get to a potential solution that might actually be divergent from their original goal. And so creating that conversation, which, again, requires understanding the problem, systems, features, etc., to have conversations that can take place in real time in order of minutes instead of over months allows us to meet the pace of change we need to see in society.
What would you like the media to know about your work?
I think it's important that we come to grips that we're not moving fast enough. We've gotten to a point in society where we need to do everything faster everywhere to meet the pace of climate change, economic development, and provide that resilient future. And I think there is an insufficient amount of attention on how to collaborate to create solutions.
Are there any questions that you would like to answer that I haven't asked?
As we have small-scale resources and large-scale resources that are increasingly connected with the digitization of everything and need to be controlled together like a well-functioning orchestra, that opens up opportunities for cybersecurity and cyber attacks. So with some partners at Arizona State and then also USAID, we're advancing that in a very critical section of the world in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, as they advance to become and create a single electricity market with hundreds of players interacting in real time. We're providing the cybersecurity foundations, the training, and then a center of excellence to allow them to secure their national electric grid for the future.
If you could have one thing that goes towards that faster advancement and use of renewable energy around the world, what would that be? What do you think would make the biggest difference?
When we take a look at the pace of change we need to see with the advancement of renewable energy, the investment or the money's there, largely the people there and the organizations are there, but we're constrained by the historical ways of which we've worked together. And so I think what we need, and which is most fascinating, is to be at that intersection of technology, business model, and policy, and working to create an environment and situation where stakeholders can work with each other in new ways to unlock new value propositions that allow the natural engine of the economy to proliferate and expand renewables at a pace that we have not yet seen.
Thank you so much, Nate. I really appreciate your time.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.